He collapsed alone in the park, and woke up to find two little girls had saved his life. The morning had started like any other for Michael Rivers, though he had no idea it would end with his life hanging by a thread. As one of the wealthiest men in the country and the CEO of a major construction empire, Michael was used to moving through life with purpose and precision. His time was scheduled down to the minute, and every step he took usually had a reason behind it. But that day, for the first time in months, he dismissed his driver and chose to walk through the park on his way to the office. He told himself it was for fresh air, maybe a quiet moment before a chaotic board meeting, but deep down, he was simply tired, of steel walls, of tinted windows, of the distance between himself and the world. Dressed in a tailored blue suit, his shoes perfectly polished, Michael looked like a man in complete control. His dark brown hair was neatly styled, and his sharp blue eyes scanned the path ahead through a pair of sleek sunglasses. Birds chirped in the background, joggers passed by with headphones in, and the scent of blooming flowers filled the early summer air. The park was calm, ordinary, peaceful. But inside Michael, something was off. He couldn't place it at first, just a slight pressure in his chest, a subtle tightening in his breath, but he ignored it. He had a history of pushing through discomfort. Pain meant nothing when deals were on the line. He made it halfway down the main path before everything changed. The world suddenly tilted, his vision blurred, and a wave of nausea swept over him. He stopped walking and gripped the metal railing beside the path, trying to steady himself. His heart began to pound erratically, as though something inside him had snapped out of rhythm. The pain in his chest intensified. He gasped once, tried to take a step forward, but his legs gave out underneath him. The ground rushed up fast and hard, and then there was only silence. His body hit the pavement with a dull thud, sprawled across the walkway like a man who had simply fallen asleep on the job, but this was no nap. He wasn't moving. His breaths had gone shallow and irregular, and his face was pale, almost bluish. People nearby didn't notice at first. A couple walked past, absorbed in conversation. A teenager on a bike sped by without looking. Time moved normally for everyone, except Michael, who lay quietly between life and death under the morning sun. And that was the exact moment when two small figures appeared on the path, holding hands. Lily and Emma, 5-year-old identical twins with curly blonde hair and big blue eyes, were walking through the park on their way to the hospital. Dressed in white summer dresses that fluttered with every step, they looked like they had stepped out of a children's storybook. But they were not on some fairy tale stroll. They had been at the playground earlier, trying to distract themselves from the reason they walked this path so often. Their mother had been in a coma for a month, and every few days, their grandmother brought them to visit her in the hospital just a few blocks away. That day, they were walking on their own. Their grandmother had grown tired and trusted them to make the familiar route alone. Lily was the first to see the man lying on the ground. She tugged Emma's arm and pointed. "He's not moving," she said, her voice thin with concern. The girls stepped closer, unsure whether they should be scared or helpful. Michael didn't look dangerous, just very still. His eyes were closed, and his face didn't move. "Is he not breathing?" Lily whispered. Emma knelt down beside him. She had seen someone faint once, and she remembered what to do. "I think we need to call someone," she said with determination. Reaching into her tiny backpack, she pulled out a pink toy-like phone, a real one, programmed by their grandmother with just a few emergency contacts. She pressed the big green button marked "Help" and waited for someone to pick up. When the 911 operator answered, Emma's voice was clear and steady. She told them they were in the park near the fountain, that a man had fallen and wasn't waking up. She gave their names and said they were walking to the hospital. Her words were simple, but they were enough. The operator sent an ambulance immediately. Emma held Lily's hand tightly as they stood near Michael, watching over him the way a child watches a hurt bird. Within minutes, sirens approached in the distance. 2 paramedics rushed down the path with equipment, one of them already assessing Michael's vitals as the other began CPR. A third voice radioed in updates. The girls stepped back but didn't leave. One of the paramedics turned to them briefly. "Did you call this in?" Emma nodded. He smiled. "You probably just saved his life." They didn't smile back. They just watched as the man they didn't know, the man in the beautiful suit with the quiet face, was lifted onto a stretcher and wheeled away. Then Lily took Emma's hand again, and they continued walking to the hospital, like they had always planned. They had no idea that the man they had just saved wasn't just anyone. He was Michael Rivers. A billionaire. A CEO. A man who had never been rescued by anyone in his entire life, until now. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines and the rhythmic sound of a heart monitor. Michael Rivers slowly opened his eyes to a blur of white ceiling tiles and fluorescent lights. For a few seconds, he had no idea where he was or how he got there. His head was heavy, his chest sore, and his throat dry. He blinked slowly, trying to steady his focus. A nurse noticed the movement and walked over to his bedside, gently placing a hand on his arm and speaking in a calm voice. "You're awake," she said softly, smiling. "You gave us all quite a scare." Michael tried to speak, but his voice came out hoarse and barely audible. "What happened?" "You collapsed in the park," she explained. "Heart arrhythmia, most likely triggered by stress or an underlying condition. But you're very lucky. Someone called 911 almost immediately. The ambulance was there within minutes. If they hadn't called when they did, you probably wouldn't have made it." He frowned, the memory distant and unclear. "Who called?" The nurse hesitated, then gave him a curious look. "Two little girls. 5 years old, from what we were told. They saw you collapse and one of them called emergency services using a phone their grandmother gave them. They even stayed with you until the paramedics arrived." Michael blinked in disbelief. "Little girls?" "Yes," the nurse nodded. "Apparently they were on their way to visit their mother here at the hospital. She's in a coma." The girls didn't even wait around for attention. They just went on their way. Remarkable, really. He leaned back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling, absorbing the weight of that information. The thought of two small children noticing him, recognizing the danger, and stepping up in such a critical moment, it was almost surreal. In his world, everything was calculated. Success was measured by outcomes, driven by logic, not emotion. Yet here he was, alive because of the quiet courage of two kids he had never met. By the next morning, Michael's condition had stabilized enough that he was allowed visitors. His assistant came in with flowers and documents, already talking about rescheduling meetings and shifting appointments, but Michael stopped him. "Find out who those girls are," he said quietly. "I want to meet them." Later that day, a young doctor handed him a copy of the emergency report. There, scribbled in the paramedics' notes, were the names, Lily and Emma Hart. They had given their grandmother's phone number during the 911 call. That was enough. Michael didn't wait. He asked a hospital volunteer to help him find their mother's room, and then insisted on walking there himself, despite protests from his nurse. The walk was slow. His legs were still weak, and he leaned slightly on the railings along the corridor. But something was pulling him forward, a need to see for himself who these girls were, to look them in the eyes and say thank you, not out of obligation, but from something deeper that he couldn't yet explain. When he reached the small, shared pediatric waiting area, he spotted them immediately. Two little girls sitting on a bench, side by side, identical in every way, curly blonde hair, blue eyes, white dresses slightly rumpled from the long day. One of them was reading a worn picture book, while the other was quietly swinging her legs. They looked up as he approached, their faces curious but not frightened. Michael stopped a few feet away, uncertain how to begin. "Are you Lily and Emma?" he asked gently. The girls exchanged a glance, then nodded in unison. He smiled, something soft and unfamiliar in his expression. I think you saved my life. Lily's eyes widened a little. You were the man in the park. Michael nodded. I was. And I'm very lucky you were there. Emma stood up, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. I called the ambulance. I knew the number. I know, he said. You were very brave. Both of you. The girls looked at each other again. There was no pride in their expressions, no seeking of praise. They had done what needed to be done. Nothing more, nothing less. That quiet strength shook something loose inside Michael. These weren't just kids. They were survivors, small, strong, and carrying far more than they should at their age. Can I sit with you for a minute? He asked. They nodded. He lowered himself carefully onto the bench beside them, wincing slightly from the effort. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lily pointed across the hall toward a quiet room with the blinds drawn. That's where our mom is. She doesn't wake up. Michael looked at the room, then back at her. I'm sorry. That must be really hard. Emma shrugged lightly, though her eyes betrayed the weight behind the motion. We come to visit her. Grandma says she might wake up if we keep talking to her. He nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. These children had been carrying heartbreak on their backs like school bags, and yet they'd found the strength to save a stranger in the middle of it all. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card. This is my number, he said. If you or your grandma ever need anything, you can call me. Emma took the card carefully. Are you a doctor? He smiled. No. I build buildings. Big ones. But I'd like to help however I can. The girls seemed unsure what to say. So he stood up slowly, thanked them again, and turned to leave. As he walked back to his room, the hospital hall seemed different, less sterile, more human. He couldn't stop thinking about those girls. About how easily the world could have lost him that day. And about how, despite all his money, power, and planning, it had been two small children who brought him back. And without knowing it, they'd started something that would change all their lives. The next few days passed slowly for Michael as he remained in the hospital under careful observation. Though he was recovering physically, something inside him refused to settle. Every time he closed his eyes, he didn't see the meetings he was missing or the boardroom chaos that might await him. Instead, he saw two tiny hands, a pink toy phone, two pairs of solemn blue eyes. His thoughts kept returning to Lily and Emma, two 5-year-old girls who should have been thinking about toys or bedtime stories, but instead had grown used to hospital hallways, nurses' shoes, and the sound of machines beeping beside their mother's bed. Michael had experienced control in every form. He'd built skyscrapers, turned bankrupt properties into empires, and negotiated billion-dollar mergers without blinking. But nothing in his life had prepared him for what he was feeling now. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something more persistent, something unshakable. These girls had walked into his life by chance, but the weight of what they carried, and the way they had acted without hesitation, unsettled him in the most unexpected way. They had seen a man fall and didn't freeze. They didn't run away. They helped. Because to them, helping was just what you do, even if you're 5, even if your world is already falling apart. Unable to ignore the pull, Michael asked his assistant to dig deeper. Discreetly, of course. What he found only made things worse. The girl's mother, Claire Hart, had been in a coma since a car accident nearly 6 weeks ago. Their father had vanished from their lives years earlier, and their sole guardian now was their maternal grandmother, an elderly woman in her late 70s, who was struggling to cover both medical expenses and the needs of 2 energetic little girls. They lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment across town, and the hospital was a 30-minute walk away. That meant the girls had walked all the way to the hospital by themselves the day they found him. Not out of adventure. Out of necessity,